Welcome to another episode of Consumer Protection and You with Ryan Lippe. Today we're going to be looking at hiring a tax preparer, so stay tuned. Welcome to another episode of Consumer Protection and You with Ryan Lippe. Ryan is an educator with the Consumer Protection Section with the State of Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost office. Ryan, it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Great to be back with you. Thanks so much, Patrick.
You know, throughout the year, we go through a number of different emotional experiences. For instance, at Christmas time, it's sort of a happy time. Thanksgiving is sort of family oriented. At the beginning of summer, we look forward to being on the outside rather than staying in the inside. And we also have that period of time that many people tend to dread, and that's tax season.
And that is definitely true. Definitely true.
And in the tax season, etc., we have many ways of completing our taxes. We can do it online. We can do it ourselves, or we can hire someone. And that's the topic that you're going to be talking about. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you decide to do it yourself, my one tip is don't use free public Wi-Fi. You don't want to go into the library and start putting your social security number in free public Wi-Fi. Don't do it from the coffee shop. Don't do it from your airport. Do it from the security of it when you're at home behind a firewall with encryption. So hopefully your home network is much more secure than most of those free public Wi-Fi hotspots. So if you decide to do it yourself, do that at home. And then also you might want to consider bringing it to the post office instead of putting it in a mail receptacle or an unlocked mailbox with the flag up. So just a couple of tips, because you don't know what is going to transpire after it leaves your hands if you put it in an unlocked mailbox. And, you know, there's been issues with mail being stolen in some areas and things like that. And suffice it to say, you don't want scammers and identity thieves to have your social security number, which is probably prominently on your tax forms that you're mailing in.
I see a lot of ads, especially during this time, that they say, you don't have to do anything, just come to us and we'll take care of it. But I find that difficult to understand, because we do have to prepare all the information so that the tax preparer can process it correctly.
Absolutely. And, you know, these are people that are going to have exposure to your social security number. And no matter who prepares your taxes, ultimately you are responsible for the accuracy of that return. And you are responsible for getting all the information to your tax preparer so that you're in good shape when the information gets to the Internal Revenue Service and to the Ohio Department of Taxation. So a lot of the obligations and liability, you know, kind of falls on us as the tax return recipient.
One of the things that I, as a business development counselor, recommended is keep up with your paperwork when you're in business. And the reason being is that the more you put off doing daily receipts and invoices and income, the less time you have to spend in gathering up. I had one business that had all the receipts in a paper bag for 12 months. And it took them forever just to sort through all of that information.
Yeah, well, I've got 10 tips and steps to share with you in terms of selecting a tax preparer if you decide not to do it yourself and decide to hire somebody. Number one is you want to check the preparer's qualifications. Now, I know you probably don't have, most of us don't have MBAs. Some of us are lucky and do, but I don't. So when you're checking the preparer's qualifications, they may be a CPA, which they don't have to be, but they may be a certified public accountant if they passed the right tests and gotten that credential. They may be an enrolled agent, which means they are able to handle tax returns on behalf of you and me and everybody else if they want to. Or they may be an attorney, a tax attorney of some sort. But one thing you can use to your advantage is the IRS has a directory of federal tax return preparers with credentials and select qualifications. So it's a tool to help you find a tax return preparer if you need a specialist. The directory is searchable and sortable by a listing of preparers, and any tax preparer should have what we call a preparer tax identification number, a TIN. So we want to make sure that they meet the standards set forth by the IRS, or at least are in that directory of federal tax return preparers. You also want to check the preparer's history. There could be disciplinary actions and license status issues if it's a credentialed preparer. So for the CPAs, for the certified public accountants, check with the State Board of Accountancy, which is, I believe, I think it's its own board in the state of Ohio. State Board of Accountancy, and you can find out more on ohio.gov, the main state of Ohio website. For attorneys, you can check with the Supreme Court of Ohio. They're the ones that regulate the disciplinary actions against attorneys. And for enrolled agents, which a lot of us may be using, there is you can verify the enrolled agent status on irs.gov, or there's a directory. So, the IRS is a very, very important component of checking up to make sure that you have the right enrolled agent for the set of skills you're looking for.
I can't agree enough. Having spoken to IRS agents in my business development capacity, one of the things that the agent indicated is that if the taxpayer has had complaints or there has been some impropriety, that usually the businesses that tax preparer prepares for tends to get audited.
Yeah. And certainly you don't want to get in that situation if you can avoid it. And also everything costs money. So ask about service fees. You want to avoid preparers who base fees on a percentage of the refund, or, you might want to steer clear of any claims that they're going to get you a bigger refund than you've ever seen, or a bigger refund than competitors. And when you're asking about a preparer's services, you don't need to give them your tax documents and your social security number and all that information until you've actually retained that person. So you don't want to just willy-nilly share all your details unless you know they're the ones that you're going to want to prepare your taxes. And of course, the quickest way to get your refund, we all want a refund to come quickly if we're due one. It's to electronically file. And, the enrolled agent, the CPA, whoever's handling your taxes will be able to line that up for you, most likely, to electronically file. You don't have to. You can certainly use the postal mail if you'd like. But the quickest way to get your refund is to electronically file your tax return and to use direct deposit. They seem to like that in terms of the ease of having the machines talk to each other and getting your refund fairly quickly that way. Also, it's important to contact your tax preparer as early as possible because they get really, really busy. So make sure that whoever you're choosing has time to file your taxes before this year's deadline. And right now we're speaking at the end of March, and I know this probably won't get out until beginning of April. So this is busy season for tax preparers that are good. So be wary of anybody that's offering inexpensive last-minute services, because they may not be as legitimate as someone that's bogged down in all the accounting and tax preparing that most of the really good accountants are doing right now.
I've always recommended to businesses to start the tax around November. And I know that that's a busy time also, but if at least you're able to gather all the information, etc., it really helps in the long run because filing in at the end of January, when you get all your W-2s and things of that nature, you can get in line and not worry about waiting to the last minute.
Yeah, and of course, good preparers will ask to see your records and receipts. And if you've already provided it to them, you've taken a big step forward. But they might ask you questions about your total income, your tax deductions, your credits. They're not just going to just make some numbers up out of clear blue. I mean, they really want to be accurate, and they want to provide the right information, and that's what the IRS and the Ohio Department of Taxation probably expect from you as the as the person owing the taxes. You certainly don't want to file a blank tax return. That's not a good sign. You want to file one that's complete, that you can attest to as it being accurate. And you want to review your tax return before signing it. You want to feel comfortable with the accuracy of your tax return. You don't want any outstanding questions. Make sure your refund goes directly to you and not to the preparer's bank account. So you want to review the routing number. You want to review the bank account number on the completed return, and make sure that whoever prepares your taxes, whether it's a CPA or an enrolled agent or an attorney or you do it yourself, make sure you have a copy of your completed tax return. The same document that goes to the IRS should be in your hands for several years, so you have that history.
I think that's very important in the fact that you are still responsible, as you had indicated, for the tax returns. And if there is improprieties based on the tax preparer, because you signed that, you are still responsible for that.
And also, make sure your preparer is the ones that is signing it in the appropriate space on the tax return. They should all have a preparer tax identification number. So all paid tax preparers have to have one of those. By law, paid preparers have to sign the returns and include their PTIN, the preparer tax identification number. So you need to sign it, obviously. They need to sign it. So you can keep in good standing with the IRS and the Ohio Department of Taxation. And finally, report abusive tax preparers to the IRS. I mean, good thing is most tax preparers are honest. Most of them provide great service to their clients, but some preparers are dishonest, just like some charities are dishonest and some businesses. So report abusive tax preparers and suspected tax fraud to the IRS. There's a special form for complaints, and you can find out more at the IRS.gov website. But the other thing to remember is there's lots and lots of tax identity theft these days. So please keep in mind that if you have filed and you get a letter back saying that someone has already filed using your personal identifying information like your social security number, that is something that you need to work out with the Ohio Department of Taxation and or the IRS. They each are able to handle identity theft issues that may involve taxpayers. Now, while our office has an identity theft unit, when it comes to tax identity theft, we send consumers to the IRS because they have their own identity theft unit. We send people to the Ohio Department of Taxation if it's a state issue, because we're not best equipped to handle tax identity theft like we would if we were the actual regulatory authority like the IRS or the Ohio Department of Taxation.
What are some of the things that people have come to you about?
Certainly people feel at risk if there's been a data breach. I think that's important to note because sometimes your information isn't used right away. sometimes a scammer or an identity thief will keep your social security number for a long time before they actually use it to file taxes in your name. So if you feel vulnerable to identity theft, those kinds of issues, you should be able to address that with the IRS. They even have codes they can, I believe, give you to recite to them when you file your taxes. I think you get a new code each year. If you want that identity theft kind of protection, contact the IRS and let them know that. Because if you want a security code, I don't think there's any scrutiny that they provide in terms of you just wanting an identity theft security code for your tax return. You can request it, as far as I know, through the Internal Revenue Service. Then people can't, at least have a trouble doing it on your behalf. Going in and getting a refund, claiming to be you, and giving them a false bank account to where they send the refund to. But we've had in Ohio, as well as in all 50 states, tax identity theft is fairly common, unfortunately, where people do have exposed social security numbers. Someone files taxes on their behalf, and then when they go to file taxes later in the season, they learn the hard way that someone's already filed on their behalf. So it's important to file early in the tax season if you can possibly do it. I know a lot of people may not be getting your W-2s till January, and may not be getting some of the investment income information till February. But file as early as practicable to make sure you beat identity thieves to the punch, essentially.
IRS is a scary organization, and many people are hesitant about contacting for information or personal information. Any suggestions on what we can tell the viewing audience if you're a little bit timid about contacting IRS?
Well, we do work with the Internal Revenue Service in terms of consumer education, and sometimes I think they're partners during National Consumer Protection Week. And they generally have good staff there. It may take a few minutes to get through if you're trying to call them through their toll-free number. But in the end, as long as you're being honest and legitimate, they'll probably treat you with professionalism and as you should be treated. If you have any problems, I will tell you, not a lot of people know. My feeling is not a lot of people know that there is an Office of the Taxpayer Advocate. Throughout the United States, there's taxpayer advocates that work for the IRS, and they're the ones that look out for tax problems and customer service issues. And if you think your rights are being violated, or if you need help and you need someone to defend you in terms of IRS problems, my first call, at least, would be to the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate that works right at the IRS. They're sort of like an ombudsman, I would say, for tax return issues. So if you don't think you're being treated fairly, if you don't think you ought to pay something they say you owe, if there's any problem at all, call the IRS. Or if you've already tried that and don't feel like you're being treated properly, contact the Office of the Taxpayer Advocate. There's one assigned to every state, one office assigned to every state. So look up where that information is for the state of Ohio and make sure you use that as a resource if you need to. That's what they're there for.
What are some other tips that you might recommend consumers consider when collecting a taxpayer?
One thing is for sure, you want to be careful with your personal information. So as I mentioned, you don't want to give information out to folks that you're just looking to possibly file your tax returns with as a preparer. You want to actually wait until you've actually made a decision to give them any personal identifying information. And just remember, all year round, we have an obligation really to keep those receipts, to keep a good track of our tax liabilities and forms that you get in the mail, so you can collect those and give them to the tax preparer. But like giving out information too readily throughout the year, even if it's something that is fairly innocuous, like a sweepstakes or a drawing. Sometimes they want your full birth date and they want your address and your name, and sometimes even more information than that. So it's just important to keep your focus on who you're giving information to, and see if they really need it. See if it's something you really want to give information to, or if that's someone that may be liable to sell your information or have a data breach, or be careless with your personal information. When you go into do a sweepstakes or a drawing or something like that, look for the terms and conditions, look for the privacy policy, so you know if your information is going to be sold. That helps you year round. Now, hopefully they're not asking you for your social security number for entering a contest or a giveaway or something. But don't give it out to anyone unless you've truly scrutinized exactly who they are and know that they're legitimate. I mean, there's lots of scams going on with government imposters. I remember they arrested 90 folks running a fairly professional call center that was scamming people into believing they were from the Internal Revenue Service and that there were agents out there, and they wanted your money. They said that they owed back taxes. They said that they owed interest. They said that they owed fees, when they really didn't even work for the IRS. So if you get a call from someone that claims to be from the IRS, see if you can call them back through the legitimate phone number for the Internal Revenue Service. All these agencies have toll-free numbers for the most part. They all have an ability to take a phone call. So if they claim to be legitimate, be skeptical, question it, realize that most times if you get any kind of problem with the IRS or Social Security or Medicare, most government agencies like that start the conversation with a letter in the mail. So if you get a cold call claiming that somebody's from the IRS, be skeptical, check it out, hang up the phone, call back the IRS at the phone number you know to be legitimate, that you've independently verified as the real phone number, not the phone number they leave on a voicemail or an answering machine, because that could be a scam call center like I mentioned. And that was a call center offshore, not in the United States. This one happened to be in the country of India, and they had 90 people that they caught impersonating the IRS. And that was about 6 years ago. But you got to figure they're still out there going at it, claiming to be Social Security, claiming to be the IRS, claiming to be Medicare. So don't sacrifice your personal information until you're sure you're talking to the real deal.
On the same line, big box companies do employ part-time tax preparers, and the laws change every year. Well, not significant, some laws change, and so finding that great tax preparer is very important.
Absolutely. You want somebody that's continually being educated on the nuances and the subtle changes in tax law. The standard deduction can go up and down. Whether you file married or file separately is one question. Whether you itemize is always an important issue. Whether it's worth itemizing or whether you just take the standard deduction is always a question that you can discuss with your tax preparer. And, I know that tax preparers that I've used sometimes have to do extra work to figure out whether it's worth itemizing for deductions or whether they should file using the standard deduction. All that is beyond my expertise. I leave it in the hands of the CPAs, the enrolled agents, the tax attorneys, the folks that keep up with the law and the rules. But everybody's different. Everybody's situation is different. So you want somebody that takes your individual needs into account when you decide on who to prepare your taxes through.
One of the things you probably do is check over the tax, even though you may not be familiar with all the laws, you do check over your taxes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You do not want to sign a blank form. You don't want to sign a form that you have not inspected yourself that looks like it's accurate. Of course, you can't do necessarily all the work the tax preparer does because they're the experts. But again, you're signing the return, you're responsible for it. And if anybody's going to be audited, it's going to be the tax, the one that has to file taxes with their social security number. That's you and me.
If I have some questions about this and I wanted to contact you, again, how do I contact you and where can I see your website?
Sure. Our website is www.ohioprotects.org. That's www.ohioprotects.org. That is the website for the Ohio Attorney General's Consumer Protection section. And our toll-free number for our help center is 800-282-0515. I want to give you one other website. That is where you can view our Consumer Advocate newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter. And if you have time, you can read the February 2023 edition of the newsletter where we did an article on choosing the right tax preparer. And that is available at www.ohioattorneygenera.gov. That's the big website that has all the newsletters and annual reports and information from the entire Attorney General's office. But if you have something that's consumer specific, usually it's addressed at ohioprotects.org as well.
Are you available to talk with individuals?
Absolutely. We do a lot of presentations on senior scams, consumer scams, cybersecurity, identity theft. We usually don't go around talking about taxes. That's really not our expertise. But if you want one of our presentations on consumer scams or cybersecurity or identity theft, give a call to that toll-free number, 800-282-0515. Let them know you want a consumer presentation, or just go on our website at ohioprotects.org. You can fill out a form and we can get the ball rolling on coming out to your business or your organization, or doing a virtual presentation. We can do that as well.
And is there a cost?
Everything is free. We just ask that you have at least 20 attendees if we're going to be doing an in-person presentation. And there's no minimum at all if we're doing a virtual presentation, but 20 if we're going out and traveling to your location.
Hey, we're talking with Ryan Lippe. Ryan Lippe is an educator with the Consumer Protection section of the State of Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost's office. Ryan, thank you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the attention you give these issues, and we hope to hear how we can help some of your viewers.